The media agency network Zenith Optimedia is forecasting the global ad market will grow by over 5% next year and nearly 6% the year after. The forecast for ad growth in Australia, though, isn't even half that. 2.4% year on year in 2014 and then 2.7% for 2015. So why is our market tipped to underperform? Well, our co-host James Manning, editor and publisher of Mediaweek, is here, but we're also joined by Ian Perrin, the CEO for Australia and New Zealand at Zenith Optimedia. Ian Perrin, welcome to Mediaweek.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a bit about the forecast firstly, though, to bring us into the picture. You do them globally, but then also break them down into the major markets country by country?
That's right, and it's something we've been doing for the last 26 years, so we've got a lot of data and history in terms of the numbers, and we do them in 80 countries around the world, so it's nice to create the comparisons between the different markets.
Now, your global head, I think the guy who sort of runs all these numbers is Jonathan Barnard.
That's right, yeah.
He noted he hadn't had to revise downward the global figures for, I think, the first time so you reports are quarterly, so it was about first time about 10 reports or something, he said. So he's noticed a bit of a change in sentiment, if you like, globally. We've got to be careful not to read too much into that.
I don't know if I agree with that. I think I think what they're seeing in Europe finally is a little bit of strength in the market. I think that the BRICS, which have historically been spending a lot, I think globally people don't think that their economic forecasts are as good for the BRICS, yet from an advertising point of view we're still seeing very strong demand in those BRIC markets. So I think for the first time in a long time we're feeling a lot more buoyant around the global advertising expenditure, and it's probably worth saying that that's in a year where we don't have an Olympics or a US election or a World Cup. So the fact that they are feeling a lot more bullish around the numbers should give us a little bit of heart in the fact that it's a little bit stronger than everyone thinks.
Just to put it into perspective again, though, 5 and 6%, how does that stack up even historically? How would you kind of term that?
So that's sort of medium-term growth in terms of what we'd see historically. I think it's been a little bit lower than that over the past few years, but going back to the late 90s, we're seeing growth of a little bit higher than that.
Okay, so, and Europe's quite stand out at the moment. Where else is really poking its head above the parapet and showing some strength? Well,
I think, Europe is probably a little bit stronger than we thought it was going to be. I think it would be an exaggeration to say that Europe's on fire. But I think, Asia has been strong for a long time and continues to be very strong. I think there's a lot of sentiment around the strength of the South American advertising markets, particularly around an Olympics and a World Cup in that region, which we think will see a lot of strength. But I think, often the big drivers of change come from the States, and we're seeing a marked increase in financial performance out of the States over the past few quarters, which is making us feel a little bit more bullish around the results. So we certainly don't hope that the matters of the last 48 hours in terms of the shutdown of the government will have too much of an effect on that.
Could it? Is that the discussion in the last few days?
Potentially it could. If that carries on for too much longer, then there's certainly a fact that could start to diminish consumer sentiment, and that could have an impact on advertising dollars.
I mean, Australia's always ranked well in terms of global ad spend. I think we're about number 7.
That's right.
At the moment. We don't look in any danger of losing that in the short term. With some of those emerging markets, I think Russia's one of them, might overtake us eventually. Do we need to bear that in mind when we look at us, with slower growth than the sort of global figures?
I think, Australia has, as you've said, been historically a very strong advertising market, and we see still a lot of strength in the advertising market here, but we are a very developed economy versus some of the Russias and Koreas who are surging ahead of us. So I don't think we should see it as a sign of weakness in the Australian advertising market. I just simply think that we're not going to see as large a growth as we see in some of the emerging markets.
Yeah. So what about some of the sectors here? TV having a reasonably good year. Internet continues to boom. Print still got a bit of bad times ahead of it, it looks like.
I'll take that in order. I think television has historically been very strong but also very consistent in terms of the advertising expenditure. I think the difficult issue that will face television over the next few years is the cost of doing business, and at some point they'll have to pass that cost on to advertisers. So if you think the section of their pie that they currently have, if they're going to be charging people more in order to get into the TV market, then there'll probably be some advertisers who won't be prepared to pay that premium. So I think television is in a solid position, but you've got to be careful careful that the costs don't become too high for advertisers as a barrier of entry. I think the internet will continue to absolutely dominate, and you'll see a massive transformation into digital spend and away from print spend. I think what we'll start to see is a lot of that demand in digital has been around desktop and has been around search. I think what we'll see moving forward is an explosion of mobile and social channels, and unfortunately all of that will come at the expense of print.
On the mobile ad spend, are you finding that is slow compared to what you're seeing in other markets in terms of a slow pickup? Because we're always such early adopters of technology and new smartphones, but it just seems like that area hasn't picked up so much.
I think Australians are wonderfully ahead of the curve when it comes to consuming mobile content. I think advertisers have been a little bit slow in terms of uptaking how to use the technology. And I think that's one of the key barriers with digital technology, is working out how to best use it from a brand point of view. In the old days, if you were on a TV network, you just simply ran ads. When it comes to a mobile device, the screen is a lot smaller, so it's a lot more difficult to run ads. So when we talk about seeing growth in mobile, it's more about how you can use the mobile device as a form of utility.
Are we struggling with it more than other markets? Are the advertisers?
Yes, I think so. But, I think a lot of the Asian markets aren't, and their solution to the problem is simply running very small, very irritating ads for consumers. Right. So as a consumer, I'm quite comfortable with the fact that we're not running lots of those really intrusive ads at the bottom of your mobile screen. So I think we're probably a little bit slower in that, but I think there's an opportunity for us to work out from an advertising point of view how we can use the mobile device better, because there's certainly a massive amount of opportunity there.
And just quickly maybe too on outdoor, sort of off the radar a little bit compared to some of the other media, but they're sort of building nicely each year, little bits of growth. I think they'll be overtaking magazines next year.
I'm fairly bullish around the prospects for the out-of-home industry. I think one of the issues that print titles have is they're a very static form of media. Obviously, you could argue the same for an out-of-home billboard, but the opportunity that out-of-home has is obviously the connection to a mobile device. So suddenly, when we can start to create communications that intersect between a mobile device and a billboard close to a point of sale, I think that's a huge opportunity for advertisers. So we see an opportunity not just in terms of how out-of-home grows in its traditional guise, but also in terms of how it embraces digital screens and mobile technology.
Is that still a while off?
I think that's happening now, but I think you'll see more and more of it, especially closer to the retail environment. Retail is a tricky area for us at the moment, so if we can try and connect some of our brands closer to a point of sale, I think that's a big opportunity for us. So I think that's a trend we will see over the next few years.
And just finally, are you able to sense who is actually spending the big money? I suppose just from your liaisons and even anecdotally, just as a gauge of how healthy corporate Australia is at the moment.
Sure.
Who's got the big bucks and wanting to spend it on advertising?
I think, traditionally the big FMCG companies have driven a lot of advertising. I think retail channels have driven a lot of advertising. We're seeing a real slowdown in the retail channel, which is starting to create problems in the FMCG area. So that's probably a sign of weakness in the market. I think where we're seeing strength is some really emerging type technology. So whether you like it or not, gambling is a sector that's really coming on strong from an advertising point of view. We're seeing multivitamins and people spending an awful lot of money to promote multivitamins. E-commerce type sites like Compare the Market are becoming incredibly strong and important for us as advertisers. So probably moving away a little bit from retail and FMCG and more towards probably what we'd call emerging categories.
Fantastic. Ian Perrin, thank you very much for joining us on Media Week. Thank you, Ian Perrin, CEO Australia and New Zealand of Zenith Optimedia. And coming up on Media Week, German companies increasing their stakes in Australia's magazine market.